We're really lucky to have Kara here with us. I think most of you know that for Dave and I, innovation, technology more broadly has been a super hot topic, very, very focused on our business, our industry, which has been a traditional old economy business, and how we can lead the transformation not just of Standard and GAF and BMI, but of the industry more broadly. And how can we have innovation and technology really inform all of our decision making? I will tell you that breaking into the cool kid club of the West Coast is not the easiest thing in the world.
They're not cool.
I knew you were going to say that. Much easier for me to say that they're cool and you tell me they're not.
They're definitely not cool.
But they've got more sneakers than we do.
Yeah.
Just a tremendous amount of information out there about the people, the businesses, the products, the politics of it all. For neophytes like us, navigating the constant news flow is not so easy. And, Kara is that, consistent, thoughtful, witty, interpreter of events that helps folks like us navigate the constant news flow. So for those who don't know, but I'm sure most of you do, first at Wall Street Journal's All Things Digital, and then with her own business, Recode, and now with the New York Times and with the Recode Decode podcasts.
You forgot the Washington Post. I was there.
Well, that was earlier. I know about Georgetown. I know about
I read
Columbia.
about technology there.
I also, frankly, know that we share a birthday on December 11th. So.
Oh my God! Wow.
So we got that.
Thank you for broadcasting my birthday.
I didn't say the year. I didn't say the year.
I actually have 6 birthdays on the internet.
Is that right?
So it may not be my birthday.
All right. Well, I will
because I know about trollers and people that steal identity. So I have 6. So you don't actually know my birthday.
See, things I don't fear about is anybody stealing my identity.
Well, I know that, but I get birthday wishes 6 times a year.
That's good. It's better than me. And so we're really fortunate to have you here and talk to us about how you see the world and maybe some of the more hot topics out there. I'm going to do my best to try and moderate and channel my inner Oprah, but having never channeled her before, I'm not sure how well this will go. But maybe sort of start with the first topic, which is what I said up front, which is for an old, kind of economy tech company, there's a lot of Xeroxes and Palms and Kodaks of the world.
Right.
Is there an example of an industry leader in an industry like ours that you can really think of that successfully adapted to be an industry leader, embracing change in technology?
Well, trying to embrace change, I would say,
Sure.
and doing it relatively successfully, very few.
Yeah.
I would have to say very few.
Yeah.
And that's typical, is that things replace. I mean, one of the things about tech is the young eats its old, right? Mm-hmm. It's the kind of thing. And so, but I don't mean young age necessarily, by the way, because there's some of the greatest innovators right now are much older, I think, right now. And the ones that are doing best in tech, like Tim Cook, Reed Hastings, some of the others are much older. Satya Nadella, they're not young people. But that said, I think if I had to think of one company, probably Bob Iger of Disney. Took over from a very difficult CEO who was thought he knew a lot about tech and knew almost nothing. And one of the things that attracted me to him was the fact that when we started to talk about it, he was, instead of being fearful of what was coming, he understood that it was coming and had to do something about it.
This is the pre-Netflix days?
Pre-Netflix. He wasn't like Jeff Bewkes, who called Netflix, I forget, Lithuania or something, aren't they Lithuania?
He was wrong.
Exactly, he was wrong. He was definitely wrong, and here we are today. They're owned by AT&T. So he, to me, exemplified the right kind of mentality of a CEO who embraced change in a way that wasn't fearful. And I remember I had him to one of the original All Things Digital conferences because he was the only one who was talking about it, like in terms of television, theme parks, every aspect of their business. He understood something that I've talked about a long time, which is that everything that can be digitized will be digitized.
Right.
And he understood that, and he didn't find that frightening. He just understood that this was the fact of the matter. And so I found, he essentially had the attitude of, if someone's going to eat our lunch, it might as well be us. And I thought that was really important. Now, he hasn't, a lot of the stuff that Disney's done, and some of it not under his watch, but since then has been, stumbling forward, but he certainly has, especially in the theme parks, areas in the theme parks which you don't even see, which are very important around how they deliver services. Some of this new streaming thing, I'm looking forward to seeing how they do. It's their 9th effort at it. Some of the stuff they're doing around Hulu, which they have ownership in. Thinking about where he is in the ecosystem, I think, is critical. That said, look, he just lost Shonda Rhimes, right?
Yep.
He just lost, he's not winning in the talent of their main business, which is entertainment, in terms of that. That may be just a function of the current period we're in, where Netscape seems to have, Netflix has an enormous cache of money that is just throwing around Hollywood like crazy.
Right.
And of course, nothing Hollywood people like better than money.
Right.
And so they're like, Netflix, it's great. We love Netflix. And they let us do what we want, which is like giving children an enormous amount of candy and saying, go for it. And sometimes they produce great stuff, and sometimes they produce like Bird Box. But whatever. It's a terrible movie. It is. I love Sandra Bullock. Who doesn't? But it's a terrible movie. Terrible. Don't see it.
I haven't.
Don't.
Yeah. I think I've seen everything else on Netflix, but not that one.
Don't take off your blindfold. That's the whole story. There you go. Or you'll die. That's the entire.
That's it.
That's it.
Season.
All you need to know. So anyway, so I think he's one of them. Oddly enough, I'm going to say someone you're going to be surprised by, Barry Diller. About 20 years ago, he owned, when he started buying HSN
Sure.
and the stuff, which I think was an early precursor to a
Very
lot
much
of
so.
what's going on. I think Instagram, Emily Weiss, who I interviewed last night, called Instagram HSN of today.
Yeah.
I thought he was the first person who called me. And he called me up, and he's Barry Diller, so he's super mean. And I knew him from being a programming genius and Tuesday Movie of the Week. And
Right.
I thought Tuesday Movie of the Week was the smartest thing Tuesday Movie of the Week. And he said, "Hi, my name's Barry Diller." I said, "I don't know who you are. I know. Do you know who I am?" I'm like, "Of course I do. Why do you even say that?"
Right.
Of course I do. And he's like, "I hear you know a thing or two about this digital thing. I need you to come to my office tomorrow and talk to me about it." And very few people did that. And this was back in the 90s.
What, very few people reached out? Or?
Reached out in the old spaces.
Right.
In the old spaces. He and Iger were the only two that did. Very few
It's
people
interesting.
did. Yeah,
Are
newspaper
there
people
learnings and
definitely did.
takeaways for people like us about what
Well,
worked in
I
those
think
very few cases of success?
Well, I think that you don't understand what's inevitable or what's directionally going to happen. Some of the things that I like to talk about is directional ideas.
Sure.
You will not own a car someday. It will be like owning a horse.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean the whole country, and I don't mean tomorrow,
Right.
but you will not own a car.
Yeah.
Cars will come to you, they will leave, there will be fleets of cars. You will not have insurance. You won't have it. It won't happen. And you can't conceive of this right now because it's that's not, everybody loves their car. Well, you know what? They loved their phone on their desk. They
Right.
loved this, they loved that. And the way I think about it is that's one thing, own your car. When my kids were smaller, and it just happened again recently when I was in Los Angeles, we were walking in Los Angeles again, and there was a payphone by a gas station.
Right.
My kids were 7. I have pictures of them looking at it, and they were 7 and 5. So I think it was somewhere in there, 8 and 6
Right.
or something like that. And my son, one of my sons is very technical from the beginning, and he's like, "What's that?" And I was, "It's a payphone." And he's like, "What's it for?" And I said, "Well, you called people on it, and you would put money in it, and you'd call people on it, and when you were out." And he goes, "Well, why didn't you just use your cell phone?" And I was like, "Well, you didn't have a cell phone." And he goes, "Well, how do people call you?" And I said, "Or how do people reach you?"
The payphone.
Right. And I said, "The payphone, but when you weren't at home and you didn't get the call, you just didn't get the call."
Right.
You just didn't.
Answering machines.
Before that, you didn't even get the call. It was
Right.
it just rang, and that was the end of it,
Right.
which was a great time. We all can agree on that, right? He was like, "Well, wait, you stood by, you put money in it, and then you talked to people." And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "That's filthy."
No, when he.
And I was like, "That is filthy." And I said, but then I started to think, what happened to the people who serviced the phones, who made the phones, who, all kinds of things iterated
Sure.
off of it. And so when I think about big trends, I like to think directionally, what happens when nobody owns a car? What happens to not just car salespeople, but what happens to parking lot attendants? What happens to gas station attendants? What happens to the iterations? Or Another one I just did at the National Retail Federation yesterday was, there will not be stores. Like, let's try to imagine that you will probably not have stores in the way we have them. There will be certain kinds of stores and pop-up things and different things, but the way we do stores now, and especially big box stores, won't exist.
Right.
Just will. The idea of hunting and gathering and going to get stuff and running down an aisle with a cart, it's an inane waste of time and it's not efficient.
You just got to walk up Madison Avenue and you'll see the beginning of
Right, you do. You
empty
start
stores
seeing
everywhere.
empty stores. But why have, and everyone's like, this is terrible. I'm like, why is it terrible? They're not efficient. They're not meeting our needs. By the way, we don't churn butter anymore.
Right.
Like,
We
why?
actually do
Are we
in our
bemoaning
house.
the butter churn? Right, what?
We actually do in our house.
Really?
We did, right?
Churn butter?
We did.
For fun.
For fun.
Just
and
like you will with your car on your ranch.
Exactly
Like,
right.
get around, isn't this
It's
fun?
funny because that makes me jump a little bit to something, which is, and not to turn this into a political conversation, but I remember.
Please, I
the
love
night-
political.
Yeah,
I'm kidding?
I'm going to do my best. So, the night of the election,
Yeah.
everybody's surprised. It's 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. Nobody kind of expected it to go the way it was. I'm
Right.
surfing through the channels,
Including the current president, but go ahead.
including the current president. Got to MSNBC, see Rachel Maddow talking to Doris Kearns Goodwin. Everybody's jaws drop. They're trying to figure out what happened. Rachel
Right.
looks at Doris and says, please tell me, have you ever seen a presidential candidate, never mind winner, like this before in history? Nope, never happened before. But there was a moment in time in American history that this resembles, and it was called the Industrial Revolution, and it's when everybody in the farm lost their jobs
Yes.
and they moved to the city, and there was
Yeah.
a whole displacement of, a workforce. I mean, stipulating that we're living in that time.
We are.
How do you think about, the democratization of technology, the democratization of the distribution of voice and message that maybe started with Howard Dean and Obama prior to our current president, leading to this more chaotic political
I don't
world?
think it's democratized.
Okay,
I-
more democratized than it used to be, at least.
I think people have a lot of access, but no power, a lot of voice, but no real impact. And that's what I think has happened.
Interesting.
Aside from Donald Trump, here's why. You think about it as democratized, but most of the social media companies are centralized.
Right.
There's one person who owns and runs the most important communications medium in human history. One person. His name's Mark Zuckerberg.
Right.
And he's entirely incompetent to the task, okay?
Right.
I'm sorry, he's
I listened
brilliant.
to your podcast with him yesterday.
Right, oh, the
more
Holocaust
recent one.
deniers one?
July?
Yes, the Holocaust deniers one. They're good people.
I didn't know that was the title of it. But
They don't mean to lie. That was where he said that, and
Yeah.
I literally was like, oh God, you really need to stop running this company. Let me do it for you, just for that moment.
But I think he said he wasn't going to fire himself on your show.
I tried.
I know.
I tried.
It's valiant.
No, what I was trying to get to in that particular thing, and then I'll go back to the first thing, was I was trying to get him to take responsibility for what he made and the damage he caused.
Yeah.
And especially the deaths in Myanmar and India and the Philippines and things like that, and some of the stuff around the Russia, and it wasn't hacking again, it was the use of the platform as customers. I was trying to get him to try to take responsibility for it.
Right.
One of the things they try to do in Silicon Valley is they tell you how smart they are, and then when something bad happens, all of us have to fix it together. And I was like, all of us don't have $64 billion, just you, right? And all of us didn't get the benefits, and all of us didn't create this or make these decisions. And so what I was trying to get him to do several times, if you noticed, at least 6 times,
Feeling.
to have a feeling. How do you feel about this?
Yeah.
How do you feel about this? Now, when the guy who invented the atom bomb said, I have become death,
Right.
which was,
That's a feeling.
that's a feeling.
Bad one.
A bad one, exactly. And he acknowledged what he had wrought,
Do you
right?
think that he doesn't acknowledge inside, outside, or he just is
Ever.
too well prepared
So what
to
I
talk?
did is I asked him 6 times.
Right.
It was really interesting.
Yeah.
And he finally said, well, what do you want me to say? And I said, you might start by saying, I'm sorry.
Right.
And you might start by saying, here's what I did wrong. But instead of what they do in Silicon Valley, I always say it's amazing that they can see themselves in mirrors in Silicon Valley because the lack of self-reflection is
Right.
so vast. Like they're
Right.
vampires, right?
Right.
And so they do. And so you want to go, you can't know how to move forward or create solutions until you know the errors you've made.
Right.
And so they're persistently unable to reflect on anything because they always, when what he did in that interview, he's like, I'd say, how do you feel about what happened in Myanmar? I feel like we all need to find solutions to the problems there. And I said, yeah, but you're the arsonist who burnt the building
Yeah.
down, so I'd like to understand how you're going to build it. And he's like, I'd like to say solutions are what I'm all about. And I'm like, yeah, but you created the problem,
Right.
so I don't really want to talk about solutions until I understand how you created the problem.
Right.
And it went on, and it became comical, the refrain. And so that's when he said, I said, who's responsible? And he goes, well, ultimately, I built it. I finally got him to kind of take responsibility. And he said, ultimately, I built it. I guess I'm responsible. And I said, so?
Right.
And he goes, do you want me to fire myself? I said, works for me.
Right.
But my point, I was trying to make a bigger point of the lack of responsibility that these tech leaders have for what they created. I'm not the only one. Tim Cook tried to do it.
Sure.
In an interview I did with him in March, where we talked about it, in the case of Zuckerberg at least. A lot of different leaders are trying. Satya Nadella, most of the people who are doing this are adults who have an ability to have self-reflection and normal human emotions and have some level of, which I've written in the Times, some levels of humanities education.
Right.
Where where you understand philosophy and society and impact. And so I find it troubling that a lot of the people running Silicon Valley have no humanities background.
So expand and abstract it for a moment, which is, forget founders who, will be there for at least their lifetime. But executives come, executives go.
Right.
The institution lives. I know you focus a lot on ethics and sort of the scale of these organizations now. I find people, and Dave and I talk about this sometimes in between roofing conversations, that people often jump to antitrust as the solution for these issues. I guess sort of two questions. One, is that the right answer to the issue? And if it is, what, at least of the many things I struggle with, one thing I struggle with in the world of AI and big data, how would you even define these markets, these businesses? Like, how could you put the words on a piece of paper?
Well, they're not traditional it's not Microsoft.
Right.
It's not like Bill Gates going around threatening people. It's not so easy anymore because of what...
Disaggregate information, I mean.
Right, because what's happened now is we don't have one company like Microsoft that's dominating and sitting over innovation, or AT&T. Those breakups led to enormous innovation afterwards. Google would not have existed without Microsoft having that happen to them. AT&T spawned an enormous telecom. We wouldn't have the cell phone if they didn't do that to AT&T. And I know, as much as government regulation can be negative, and I think it can be, that kind of stuff, removing power, does create levels of innovation. It spurs innovation.
Sure.
So the problem we have now is you've got, I would say, 4 or 5 companies that are running down the highway like semi-trailer trucks, and no one can get around them.
Right.
That would be Facebook and Google, at least in digital advertising. Probably Amazon. You'd call Amazon one of them. And maybe I wouldn't call Apple, because they're just they make a device. Like it's not like they make a good device, but they have good competitors and stuff like that. But it's pretty much Amazon, Google, and Facebook that are running down the highway, and you literally can't get.
You really feel they now stifle innovation?
Yes. No, they do. They don't. You just can't. If you've noticed lately, there hasn't been a fresh new company in a long time. Like Uber, Airbnb were the last. Maybe Lyft, you can have them in there. We're the last big innovative U.S. company.
How did Apple
now,
with Spotify?
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Spotify, but it's not like. I'm sure you guys do more in a week than Spotify does all year, kind of stuff.
Good week.
Right. Exactly. The innovation is coming from China.
Right.
That's where innovation's happening.
Right.
Because a combination of the government being part of the investment, which they're doing all over the map. It's not just in tech, but they're putting a heavy emphasis on tech. It's the education system in China.
Right.
It's not just government meddling or messing with things. It's actually real, true innovation going on in commerce, in AI, in robotics, in automation, is all happening there, and including surveillance stuff, facial recognition, and. If you think you want as flawed as our country is, you don't want China to be running the internet.
Not bad.
Like, you know what I mean? You don't want them to be dominating technology.
So how do we catch up as a society, as a country? I mean, what do we do?
It would be nice to have a chief science officer running in our country.
Still an open position.
It has just been approved.
Okay.
3 years in.
Yes.
It might be nice to think science is a thing, instead of decrying it constantly. It might be nice to think, not necessarily attack every company for political reasons. You know, the Jeff Bezos thing.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, really?
Yeah.
Like, it's an astonishment. And by the way, directionally, some of these things need to be looked at. But it quashes the idea that tech is an important part of our country. We are the leading country in tech, and we have a president attacking tech. You're watching it and you're like, what?
It's obviously not healthy, and it's
right. And then saying, well, why don't we give coal miners back their jobs? By the way, coal miners aren't going to be getting their jobs. China will make robots that mine better, and U.S. companies will buy them, and that's how mining will be done.
And the threat of China has been something that multiple administrations have missed. I mean,
Absolutely, 100%. Directionally, he's correct on that. The way he's focused on plastic toys when the issues are, they're not. Let them make the plastic toys. Who cares?
Right.
Like it's not really the future. It's the really serious, innovative stuff. And the stuff around some of the arrests recently is very important. I think.
And I know this was a topic of conversation at the Code Conference, this past, but immigration, maybe spend a little time on that. I will tell you that one of the issues that we hear about on a global basis, which affects us, is labor and the availability of contractors and labor.
Right.
And, Dave and I often, tell people, we hear about it not just in our business, but all the way up to engineers for Google. Talk a little bit about
Well, I mean, another, it's not, by the way, it's just gotten super ugly during Trump, but we have not solved this. The reason we're at this position and in this debate, this ridiculous debate over this wall, is because 25 years of lack of movement by the Democrats and the Republicans on immigration. It's just we're reaping what we've sown.
Right.
Like this, it's just led to this farce.
Right.
But it's because we couldn't get smart immigration policies about how we should do this properly, so that you have a balance of safety, which is overstated. The fear factor works really well, with the idea of bringing the best and brightest into this country, which of course our country was created.
Founded.
100%. Not just my family. My grandfather came over from Italy.
Talking about it.
Your great grandfather.
Poland.
It's not just that. Is that if you think about, say, all the tech founders, Sergey Brin comes from Russia.
It's amazing.
Satya Nadella, India. Elon Musk, South Africa. Dozens and dozens and dozens of the brightest minds in Silicon Valley are immigrants, like recent immigrants, not children of immigrants. The children of immigrants, everybody is in Silicon Valley. But so that's not just skilled people. It's the entire ecosystem that holds it apart. And so one of the issues I have is you don't know, these policies, first of all, say to the world, we're closed for innovation. We don't care about your best and brightest. Secondly, you don't know who's going to be the best, right? You don't know there is a girl in Syria who could cure cancer.
Right.
She's never getting here, right? And so why do that? What is the reason for doing that in a fear-based world? And one of the great books, there's a book called The Geography of Innovation. It's a really how innovative cultures go up and how they go down. And it's been the same since Rome. It's been the same since Renaissance. It's been the same every single time. Open-minded, welcoming of immigrants, risk-prone, a little wild, definitely a little wild, a little like...
Doesn't hurt.
Lots of ideas, lots of things going down, lots of art, lots of culture and things like that. And just a general idea that this is a place you can be safe, like that you can come to and express yourself, right? Every decline of a civilization or an innovative civilization is closed-mindedness, intolerance, racism, fear. It's fascinating when you start to study it, because it's really true. And my worry is that the culture that's being built now, or being allowed to be, is pushing those fear barriers closer and closer to a non-risk kind of idea of scarcity versus abundance. Which
I mean, what you notice is that this is a global issue. I mean, I think what I would describe as different this time is traditionally, America, we have been able to escape this dynamic, and I don't think we're escaping it.
Right, we're encouraging it. Actually, we're creating it, and it's like a virus. It's going around the world. And getting back to your question, which I didn't answer about democratization of media, is the people doing a lot of this stuff are using social media to command and control.
Yeah, but you mentioned it once. We talked about the democratization of media. I can't remember where I heard you say it, but picture this current administration for a day, a week, a month, a year without Twitter. What happens?
Right. What happens? I'm going to do a column on this. I just did one about Alexandria Ocasio versus Trump. She's going to win, actually. She's
read that.
Brilliant. She's a brilliant communicator, and using it the right way, which is a reactive. She reacts and reacts and reacts again.
See if anybody here wants to watch me dance to the breakfast.
No, thank you.
Doubt it.
If you don't mind, she did a great job. But her response.
Yeah, smart.
Not just smart. I think it's hard to. She's so attuned. I called her extremely online.
Right.
It's a different thing. Trump uses it really effectively. It's just a different way. He doesn't react. He just blowhards out, and it works. It works too, but it's not going to work for the long stretch because it's not. The internet should be kind of like an accordion kind of thing. She uses it that way. He doesn't, and that's why she's going to be effective and eventually. And she's not, because right now, for example, in 4 seconds, she's gotten everyone to talk about a tax kind of thing that nobody's talked about, nobody's dared to talk about, but now she's set the agenda and she's set the narrative.
Yeah.
And they can call her stupid, but she doesn't care because guess what? They're talking to what she wants to talk about, or green climate. And it's a really interesting, they don't even realize what she's done.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And she doesn't care.
Right.
Unlike most politicians, the problem with Hillary Clinton is she was constantly aggrieved by it. I can't believe you said that. She's like, fine.
Yeah.
Like, go right ahead. And that's why the right has a very hard time getting at her, and even her own party, because...
The left can't figure her out either.
What?
The left can't figure her out either.
No, because what she did, my favorite one this week was, and it's not superficial, what she's doing is really interesting. She's setting an agenda. It's really, you can see her do it if you watch carefully, but what I thought was interesting about her was Lieberman, who's like, I'm sorry, but he's like, goodbye, Lieberman. Like, it's time to go. Nice job. Like, you know what I mean? He's at the end of a long career, some of which was great, some of which, like a long career. He's like, she's not the future of the Democrat. I was like, are you kidding me? Shush, hush, hush, Lieberman. Like, she's not the future of the Democratic Party. And she tweeted back in the most perfect style. I was fascinated by it. Was, who dis? New Congress. And I was like, oh wow, that's all it took. And it was shut. She shut him down almost utterly, in a way, in the conversation. But getting back to the uses of social media and things like that, it's being used by Duterte in the Philippines. Yeah. I did a really great podcast with of the CEO of Maria Ressa, which you should listen to.
I haven't.
She has gone to Facebook to talk about how she was jailed there. She's gotten out of jail, but she runs a thing that attacks his extrajudicial. She does a lot of incredible journalism, and she's been jailed for it. And they had some trumped up charges for about tax evasion. But he has been using the internet to create and organize politically in a way, because they're the only news sources in most of these countries.
Right.
It's happening in Turkey. It's being used all over Europe by the far right, and it's a really, and the companies are not doing anything about it, because their proclivity is to say, we're a benign platform.
Right.
Everybody gets a voice, but in fact, not everybody can manipulate these platforms as easily as the Russians or the Iranians or whoever's doing it.
It's amazing, because in every one of these conversations, you realize just how quickly the world is moving in a very nonlinear way, in a way that it hasn't been historically. We spend a lot of time trying to think about the balance between our long-term, what I would describe aspirational vision for sustainability and digitalization with the real world of what pays the bills today and what do our customers want today. How do you think about, for larger companies, that balance of future state versus keeping the lights on?
Well, I don't like to mean to sound negative about, because right now the darkness of the internet you're seeing all the time. Right. The promise of it is astonishing. Right. The promise of it is really the ability to digitize things that shouldn't be done the way they are. Like roofing has got to be one of the most inefficient things. The way someone comes out, I just had a roof put on. It's like it was literally
GF roof?
No, I don't know what it was.
That's a problem.
I'll look. Okay, it's some guy named Phil, and he's like, "This is the roof you need, Kara," and I'm like, "Fine, put it on, whatever." And I was a little more interested than your average person, but
only
not
a little.
only a little bit. And actually, you know what? I'm doing another roof on. I have another house in San Francisco,
some
and
people.
I will pay attention. And it's asphalt, I'm certain of it, or they brought me colors, and I was like, green. I don't know, purple. I don't.
Everybody here sees how much work we have to do.
Right. No. I had a solar panel on my house in 1998.
This is true.
So don't.
This is true.
I'm way farther than most people. But I think the concept is like, how can you? What parts of your business can you use digital technologies to make better and reach people better? People better. Like you can in your business, like the whole construction, as we talked before, the whole construction business is so analog.
It is.
When someone was building a wall for me, I literally said, "Oh, you're building an artisanal wall for me, like one of a kind. Why? Why is this one of a kind? Why can't you just point a VR thing at it, measure it, and make it somewhere else, and then bring it to me here? Like, why is it made by one guy every time, over and over? It doesn't make any sense."
Construction and material science more
Right.
broadly, has not caught up.
So roofs are the same way. Why couldn't someday there be a drone? Like you invested in a drone company, a drone measuring it, looking at it,
Yep.
placing it down in a very different style, even though there's some obviously physical things around waterproofing and things like that. This looks like stuff that you could start to digitize parts of it very clearly.
Yeah, no, we begin to think about the whole ecosystem of roofing and how the whole environment gets, digitized. It means certain things for us, it doesn't mean other things for us. So the good news about roofing for us is that it's a very local business. So we can be the largest in the world, but it will always be a local business.
Right.
It's why we have 185 plants around the world. It's not because we want to, it's because to service a customer, not just from a pure supply chain perspective, but from a local aesthetics and historical perspective, it requires that.
Right.
That being said, it's a very analog experience right now. I mean, people literally come in with, plastic or cardboard sample boards with shingles stapled to them.
Right.
You should get to a place where, it's a digitized transaction, whether it's Loveland, the drone company, or Hover, the digital mapping on the iPhone company.
Right.
Offtake
This
price.
AR stuff, which I think is really interesting.
Absolutely. You can, hopefully one day, the homeowner, the consumer can find us and, be able to visualize what this looks like aesthetically. We should be able to map it, price it, finance it, deliver it, work with our retail distribution partners and, create the environment of the future. We've hired Martin DeBono to run solar. That's a whole other end of the world that's very, very important to us. So we think that it's ripe for change.
The problem is that everything that you do is full of friction, right? And what the internet has removed is friction from a lot of transactions. Uber's removed friction from getting a car. You don't even think about it.
Yeah.
It has other implications, and whether it's going to be a great business or not, it's a pretty low margin, high complexity business, really. And I'm always like, everyone's like, oh, the IPO. I'm like, low margin, high complexity. Whoa, Warren Buffett don't like this. Like, I'm pretty certain, it's just there's issues around the valuations. But the fact of the matter is they've removed friction.
Right.
And the very successful businesses going forward are going to be the ones that can remove friction for the customer, either the end customer, wherever the customer is, whatever your customer happens to be, where the friction is removed. And whether it be delivery, like Amazon does, they've completely removed the friction from buying, completely. And as Emily Weiss said yesterday, they've made buying incredible. They've ruined shopping. Right? So that's a very different thing. But they've created a moat after moat around them because of data, customer service, price, delivery. And so all the customer sees is complete convenience.
Seamless,
in something they want. Like to get them the product they want, how quickly they want. I don't have to go to the store. I don't have to go get toilet paper there. It makes it possible. Now, whether they can continue to sustain that business in a profitable way is...
different question.
Right, exactly.
One last question from me, and then sensitive to time, want to open it up to people on the floor. But moving away from our business to your business, interested selfishly on how you see the media world having changed over the last, forget the political chaos of today's world, but, think of all.
Well, they're all twitchy and PTSD right now.
But the tech billionaires who probably were partly responsible for destroying traditional media now buying Time magazine and Washington Post. I mean, how do you make...
Well, I wrote some columns about Lorraine Jobs, Powell buying, Powell Jobs. She bought some of the Atlantic. She just bought she's buying quite a bit, which is, she's really quite a remarkable person. And very thoughtful about where media is going. I kind of like it because they're humble enough around the media stuff not to be irritating. I know it sounds crazy. Mark Benioff bought Time magazine. It is interesting that the people that completely decimated the business models of these companies,
now own it.
Not just that, but classifieds, classifieds, advertising, free content, everything. So subscriptions didn't work as well, are buying it up. And you're going to see more of that in the future because, Amazon, not Amazon, Jeff buying Washington Post. I think they find it to be a really interesting way to have, to use their money.
What does that mean? Does it mean it's the new sports team? It's the new, sports team, or does it, or maybe it also means that you just can't make money in these businesses anymore?
No, you can. Washington Post is making money. Yeah, I think you can't make a lot of money. Is what it is, and I think that's the question: is do you want to? The idea of making a lot of money, making money on advertising and content.
Hard.
You don't. Like that's the big lie. You make money. Like our business, we make all our money in podcasts, if you can believe it, and events and things like that. And so, but it's really hard. Some sites do. It's not completely the case. But the way the New York Times is making money, for example, is through subscriptions. Yeah. Right? That's another way to do it. And so what has to happen is the media, look, the media is one of the most whiny group of people on the planet, and they're most risk averse. And they're always like, oh, woe is me, it's over. And they have to, just like everybody else in the workspace, has to respond to changes and accept them and then try to get creative around them.
Absolutely.
When I started to do all things digital with Walt, the only people who were the most critical were the media people, none of whom had ever run a business. Right? Sure. Let us tell you how to run a business. I said, I run a business.
Tell me about your business.
I have a P&L, my friend, and so you need to shut the fuck up and get in the back. Like, it was really fascinating. Like, and then would write things about I'm like, that's inaccurate. And I would then go online and say, and I was very transparent, which I think was irritating. And one of the things that just like any person in the world today, you have to be entrepreneurial. Absolutely. And if you're not entrepreneurial as a journalist, I think, and thinking about the products you make, I think about products a lot. Like, what is my product? What am I selling? Is it valuable to people? What can I do to monetize it in a way that also creates a great product? And I don't think journalists have thought about what they do as products as much, and they need to. They just can't.
This is what makes you unique and makes you you.
And it's weird that nobody else does. There's a couple people. Jessica Lesson's doing some interesting stuff with the information. Axios is interesting. Some of it's going to not work well, but what the key part of it is when you're in the media is you've got to constantly shift. Like constantly, that's not working, we're not doing this. When I started doing podcasts, which was 4 years ago. Really? It was 4 years ago. Yeah. It was me and a guy. Right. And we ran this very successful website. Everyone's like, oh, you're the best, this. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that anymore. And they're like, what? And I'm like, no, I don't like that anymore. I like this. This is where we're going to make the money. And one thing that people did initially, then they had all kinds of opinions, having never done it. They were like, you can't do an hour of talking to people and make money at it, because people millennials are twitchy and they don't listen to things. I'm like, I don't know, I think millennials are pretty smart. I think people are dying for really good information. I think they're dying for good conversations. I know I am. Yeah. Like, not everyone likes
My biggest problem now is how to prioritize, sort, how do you pull what you want because you're pushed
Right, exactly. So, but one of the things was to be willing to shift. Yeah. And so we created a shorter product, Pivot, and then we're looking at some other products. How do we take the podcast and make it into bits? Right. And I wish for many years ago, I don't own these rights anymore because Rupert Murdoch does, inexplicably, but we did 8 interviews with Steve Jobs. Wow. Nobody did them. Wow. They don't exist. Wow. There are no interviews of these lengths with Steve Jobs. If I had thought about it, I would have parsed them up. Here are the 10 ideas from Steve Jobs. Here are the 5 mistakes he made over the years. Here are the 5 pieces of advice he made, and sell those off in kind of an interesting way. I can't do that now, but I should have thought of it then. And so being innovative is, I think, the key part of media, and responsive to readers. That's the most important part.
Well, thank you. Just now maybe take a few moments, and would encourage everybody here not to be shy. We're fortunate to have Kara here, so please, brave soul, raise your hand.
Yes, you should eliminate Facebook from your...
Hi, my name is. Hi, my name is Steve. I was kind of interested in your opinion about the death of the personal computer. I think that's a kind of thing that's kind of going about all the way. Is that we're going to move to the cloud, and is there any opportunities, obviously in gaming, virtual reality, augmented reality, where the computer can still be there, and companies like NVIDIA can still make their general purpose devices that'll keep technology local rather than everything going to the cloud?
Is there a reason you want a personal computer?
I've had one. But I mean, is there opportunities for that to be there, right? Is there opportunities still for, the speed of light being what it is and latency being what it is, where there still be availability? Or do you believe that everything of the personal computer is going to go?
I think it's all going to go. I think especially, even though it's been like a fake dream for a while, the 5G stuff is real, and when it comes, you're going to have, these devices are going to be our country, by the way, it's a third world country in terms, that's another area that our country does not invest in. Literally, we're
You came through LaGuardia, I hear?
No, just Wi-Fi, broadband, right? Broadband. I don't even want to talk about airports and infrastructure, but I will if you'd like, because it obsesses me. The other countries are, it's just depressing when you think about it. But in terms of broadband, it's as if we decided when we did the universal telephone system where everybody had it, not everybody needs a phone. Not everyone needs a super highway. Not everyone needs a highway, a national highway system. Let's just have rutted roads. What do you think happens to the economy when you have rutted roads? You don't have an economy. You need those highways, an interstate highway system. The way we haven't invested in broadband and high-speed broadband and getting it to everybody, everybody, regardless of who they are, not just for rich people, is been a crime against the people of our country. It really is. And the fact that the way we have literally the worst service for the highest prices, which is really
inverse.
Yeah. But getting back to the computer, no, you're going to have. I don't even think you're going to have a device. I think eventually you will be deviceless. You might have some sort of something on your face. It's not clear. Look.
It gets dark
Google
really
Glass.
quick.
Let me
It's like a chip in your head, and
let me
then
tell
you're
you,
done.
you will have a chip in your head. I'm going to be first in line. I don't care. Elon Musk, when I interviewed him, talked about that.
Yeah.
That he goes, the only way we're going to beat the self-learning computers is to put a chip in our own
It's
head.
funny, he also talked a lot about living in some virtual world that isn't reality.
Simulation.
I think he's probably right about himself.
No, he doesn't say. He thinks. Let me just say, in fairness to Elon Musk, he said that we live in a simulation. That this is we are all just part of a video game of people from the future that they're playing. You might say, for example, Trump with the hamburgers in front of Lincoln last night was like the game that's they're fucking with us. They're like, what? How can we react to
The
that?
only good news I took away from this was he said that either way you should behave the same. So
yes, it doesn't
we'll
matter.
find out
but
at some point.
I think he believes we're actually in a video game.
Which one, Trump or Elon?
No, Trump is like the video game.
Got it.
So, but it's a really, lots of people in Silicon Valley think this.
I know. They're doing a lot of acid, too.
Yes, that is fair. I wrote a column about that, yes. But it's for innovation, just so you know, and inspiration.
That's what I told my parents.
Actually, let me just say, I'm going to get back to the computer in a second. The stuff they're doing around LSD experimentation, there's a great book I recommend you all read called Changing Your Mind by Michael Pollan, who's more famous for food books.
Okay.
It is an amazing book because what happened was LSD quickly became criminalized under Nixon, who was another non-innovator.
Right.
And some of the uses of LSD in small amounts and medically have astonishing and non-addictive qualities.
It's developed by the military, yes?
Yes, but so was the internet.
Yeah.
So there's some things that are going on, and a lot of internet people are paying for the research and trying to get it declassified as a class 1 or whatever it is. Because some of the applications around PTSD, around depression, will replace opiates. And that is, to me, it's like, why would you turn your back on some of this stuff? And some of it does have some qualities of brain enhancement and things like that, if used in small doses and things like that. I think both the left and the right took things like this, ketamine, all these things, and made them into a ridiculous thing versus a possibility I think it's a great book, Changing Your Mind. And I did a podcast with him and also wrote a column about this in the Times. But I'll answer your question in 1 second. So getting back to this, yes, you will have something around your head. There will be screens everywhere. If you ever saw the movie Minority Report, even though that was a dire look at the future, it's going to be a lot like that. There's going to be. Yes. Yes, exactly. And you. Yes, and then you'll have sensors on you in some fashion, whether you're wearing them or something like that. And Google Glass, for example, was not a success as a product, right? You can easily say that. I had a line where I said, Sergey's like, "What do you think, Karen?" I said, and he had supermodels wearing it. Remember when they showed it off? They had a bunch of supermodels. I said, "You just rendered supermodels unfuckable." So I was like, I know it sounds terrible, but I was like, wow, they're unattractive now with your glasses on them. And so, think about it. It's true. It's a terrible thing to say.
No
he
good
was
answer
horrified with them. I'm sorry.
They can take the glasses off.
Yeah, exactly. I thank you for that. In any case, it was a great joke. But he, directionally, the idea is correct. Directionally, it was a bad product. And the first time I saw it, I used to be married to a Google executive who was involved in the development of it. And I went on a Google Christmas, Christmas holiday party, which let me just tell you, I don't get those hours back. But they rented a casino boat in the San Francisco Bay, and then we took off, and it was me and all these Google people, and they all had just been given Google Glass as a gift when they get on the boat, but I didn't get one because I was Kara Swisher of the Wall Street Journal, and they're like, "We're not giving you one," and I was like, "Fine." And so they all put them on, and at Google, they always have fantastic food, and they had a mountain of shrimp, the best shrimp. So I stood by the shrimp bar, and I was eating giant, fantastic shrimp the whole time. And everyone had their Google Glass on for the first time. And to activate it, you say, "Okay, Google."
Right.
So they were all saying, "Okay, Google," but it was activating each other's headsets. And there were all these nerdy people. They're like, "Okay, Google," and not talking to each other, talking to their devices,
So
not eating the shrimp.
You had the shrimp bar to yourself.
I had the shrimp bar to myself, and I thought, this is the end of the world. I'm stuck on this boat.
This was not Google's original use case for
No,
Google
but
Glass.
then I thought, this is awful. But then I decided, yes, someday you're going to be this
Yeah,
way.
you think about it in our manufacturing plants. If you could get guys on a line with glasses talking to one another from a plant,
Yes, totally.
a plant in Germany to a plant in Alabama,
It's
it's
done
powerful.
correctly. There's a way to do it correctly. There's an interesting company that you can see now called Sandbox, if you want to see a really interesting company. VR has been a really difficult thing because it's only nerdy dudes think it's okay to have giant things on the back of your head. No one else does. But this is a new thing where you essentially put on a backpack that has a computer in it, as very high level computer. It wirelessly, you put sensors all over you. I played it with my 2 sons. It's the first time I saw an application of VR that was really wonderful. You go into one, what they're doing is reclaiming malls, actually, so that people go to malls. So we played a video game that was super, like a pirate thing, that was super fun. And we had VR goggles, things on our wrists, and it was wonderful. It was a wonderful application of that idea of game playing that was, and you could see them getting smaller and smaller. And the other one that I saw that Lorraine Jobs funded was a thing called Carney and E-Arena. Now, I think it's not touring still, but it was an artistic thing where you go into a room that's like people who are at the border go into a freezing cold room. You experience that very shortly. They leave you and you take off your shoes. Then you walk out to a gravel kind of room. It's another big room. And there's wind, there's haptic things coming at you, like wind and noise and things like that. You put on a VR thing and you are absolutely in the desert at the border, and ice is attacking you. And you're but you're not being attacked, you watch people being attacked. It is the most fascinating thing that gives you so much empathy for what's going on there.
Sure.
Not just the immigrants, but the ice people too. The whole thing is fear, and it's a wonderful way to use these things around. There's an empathy lab at Stanford around this stuff. So I think eventually you will have a lot of this stuff on you where you can experience all kinds of things that aren't you, including information, feelings, travel, things like that. It could be amazing. Sorry. Go ahead.
Someone else?
Yeah, my question is around, you're talking about the importance of reflection in running a company.
Right.
The importance in being able to take responsibility for when you make a mistake or when you leave the company in the wrong direction. But there's also a juxtaposition against moving this country forward by not having any fear and putting a chip in your head and moving so fast. So if we keep on moving so fast, how do we balance that with reflection? Because that is very scary if we're going very fast.
Right.
Not fast enough to look back and say, whoa, I'm making mistakes.
Right. I think what Silicon Valley people do is they conflate speed. Like the motto for Facebook, which they've been trying to dial back on heavy or pretend they never said, was move fast and break things. Now, move fast is great, but break things, who fixes them? What do you break? How did you break it? Was it yours to break? Wait a second, democracy just got broken. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so I think it's a mentality of I think his new one was move fast and be careful walking or something like that. It's something like, but be careful while you stomp everyone. And don't try to kill everyone. It's a really interesting question.
Move fast and learn things?
Learn things or
like
iterate quickly. I don't know. It doesn't work as well. But the concept is you want to be someone who's risk tolerant, like wanting to take risks, because if you don't, you sit there and don't do anything, and you don't move anything forward. And most great companies did break things. Like, you know, I could have less regard for Travis Kalanick than almost anyone I've ever covered. But he did move forward the changing things. He cut every corner. He did every awful thing. But we do have this, you know, every great fortune begins with a crime, right? At the same time, once you get into the positions of power and you do have an ability to really reflect, they don't seem to think about the consequences of things at ever once when they're making things. And that, to me, is the problem I have with them. One of the suggestions I made to a pretty big entrepreneur who was like talking like this, I said, why don't you, when you're making a product, imagine the Black Mirror episode of it. What happens in the end of it? Like, what would be the one where you'd be like, oh God, not that, like that kind of thing. What is the Black Mirror episode of what you make? At least strategize it out forward of what's the worst thing that could happen. And one of the things they tend to do is they never see the negative part because they think that's a bummer versus it's a responsible thing to do, right? They just make it and then they just hope for the best. A good example would be Facebook Live, which was their live product where everybody get to broadcast. And they showed it to me early. They show it to all reporters early. And then it's reported to you like, guess what? Like we all saw it. Like it's kind of a funny way they release and embargo things. And when I was in the room with them, very high-ranking Facebook people, they showed it to me. They were like, what do you think, guys? Cool, isn't it cool? And I was like, well, yeah, but what happens when someone kills someone?
Right.
And they were like, what? And I was like, what if someone commits suicide on it? Do you have a way to turn it off? I said, what about bullying? What about belittling? What about teens? What about this? And literally, in 2 seconds, I could think of 26 horrible scenarios for this product. And they're like, but it'd be really cool to do birthday parties. And I was like, yeah, okay, great. I'm glad about cats and birthday parties. And here you are skiing, down Kilimanjaro, whatever the hell you all do for vacations. I was like, but what about this? And they had never put in place, it's almost like doing the space shuttle without the O-rings, right? Like, you're like, don't you care about the possibilities? And at least don't you have things in place that recognize that human beings are awful in many ways. Like they never think like that. And you're that to me is irresponsible. And it doesn't slow you down in your development to think carefully about what you're making, right? Even what you're making, like what's the economic, what about how do the workers get affected?
Thinking about sort of the knock-on effects to every one of these
right,
decisions
exactly, the downstream effects of things. And I think you can decide not to care, as many chemical companies have done, as many companies over history have done. But it always ultimately leads to disaster. It always does. Like it always gets to a situation. And especially as you got to be powerful, to understand your power. One of the vexing things about Silicon Valley people is they literally act like they're powerless. I've had billionaires saying, well, what can I do about it? I'm like, well, you're a billionaire. I don't know. Most people aren't. Most people live hand to mouth. Like, you can do something about it. And so I think that's it, is whether you want to care about it, whether we can breed a group of leaders that cares about downstream effects of things.
Terrific. I think we have time for probably one more question. So, please.
So I'm a huge fan of your podcast.
Thank you.
And I'm always looking for new ones. So tell us what you listen to.
I don't listen to anything. I make them. Make them. I actually watch a lot of television in my free time. I do listen to podcasts. I sometimes hate listening to podcasts. I hate to recommend this because I think he's just a cheerleader, but Guy Raz is a super popular. You know what I mean? But everything he does, every time he interviews someone, and I know a lot of these people, he's like, well, that's incredible. How did your big brain think of that thing? And so I'm like, gee, guys, you might ask a little tougher question like about that. And so, but I get why people like inspirational stuff, so I get the appeal of it. I like all these serial crime ones. I really do. I like the one about the Clintons. I like all those. I think they're incredible. There's just a million of these. I listen to a lot of cooking ones. My son's a big chef, so we listen to a lot of them together. I love the history one. There's a bunch of history ones. I can't remember the name of the thing. I tend to recently watch a lot of TV, and I watch a lot of stuff made by Amazon and Netflix, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, whatever. I watch whatever I can do, but I've spent a lot of more time watching. I watch a lot of stuff my kids watch, actually, to see what they're doing. I've watched one of my 13-year-old go down a rabbit hole of right wing on YouTube. I did watch. He suddenly had some really weird. He's like, well, don't you think that men can get sexually harassed too? And I was like, what? Like, yeah, I guess, like 2%. I think it's 2%. I think the number is 2%. And he's like, yeah, but they can. I'm like, where did this come from? Like, and then I looked at his YouTube, and what it did is he was watching one thing about sexual harassment, and then it moved him down the rabbit hole. And so I watch a lot what my kids watch. I pay a lot of attention to memes and stuff like that. And I use Twitter a lot for guidance of stuff to listen to and watch. I do consume a lot of
Do you
Twitter.
read books?
I listen to books. I'm listening to the Andrew Jackson book. I'm listening to the the Harari book, because it's Sapiens. Everyone has to listen to it. Everyone's like, oh, and I loves it. It's essentially a history book of humanity. It's fine. It's a very well-written history book. I don't read as much. I definitely don't read newspapers. But I read the New York Times every day, or at Politico. I read Washington Post and stuff.
That's my biggest challenge now, is just the amount of content that gets pushed in.
Yeah, but it's easier and faster to read it than old news. I haven't picked up an actual physical newspaper for a
I
long
can't give
time.
up physical stuff.
Really?
Books, yeah, I love it.
Why? Oh, books, yeah.
Yeah, books, and I still have the newspaper delivered every day, but I will tell you, I haven't actually, because I get up pretty early.
Right.
I now download essentially every newspaper I read on the app,
Really?
on the iPad.
Independent bookstores are seeing a resurgence, which is interesting, because they're starting to respond to really They're, like I said, they're becoming experiential. They're becoming creative.
Yeah.
There's stuff you can't get. The
Sure.
way they put things
The
together
conversation.
and make suggestions
Yeah.
to you. There's a great bookstore. I live part-time in D.C., and I can't remember something, and it's got a great name. But I read. I do a lot. I'm very crazy when I do my media, but twitchier than I like. I wish I could read a book, but I can't. I tried on this vacation. It didn't work.
Thank you.
No problem.
This is terrific.
Thank you, everyone.
Everybody, thank you so much. Thank you, Tom.